Hi, I'm Rigger. This is your rant, and today we're diving headfirst into Ice Queendom. This video is not meant to be crazy theories. This video is not for, is Xion secretly evil, or this is why Weiss's secret weapon will be an army of militarized penguins. Those can come later, but this one is about more logical theories and things we can deduce and learn from what we've already seen without too many leaps in logic. And when there are some leaps in logic, we'll cover those and the options available to us, at least for the most likely scenarios. Also, we're speeding through this, so let's be quick. Like, comment, subscribe, usual stuff. I want to see what you think, I want to read what you think, I want to subscribe what you think. Wait, that's not right. Anyway, let's start this off juicy. Kick it off with something super fun, a banger. But stick around to the end because there is some pretty nut stuff in here. So, number 1, hyperreality. So yeah, I'm not crazy, hyperreality will be a thing, or it could be a thing. But what do I mean? Okay, basically we can all assume that the point of this is that we're diving into Weiss's nightmare, we get that. To set this up, we dove into Jean's nightmare, and that is where the examples get super fun. Because this is animation, baby, this is Shaft, baby, we can get wild, because Jean's dreams show us that hyperreality is totally possible. What do I mean by hyperreality? Simple, dream logic and dream worlds. Look at it. Jean is being dressed down by his armor and weapons that are talking to him. Plus, not only is he being dressed down, he's being aged down as he becomes a younger version of himself. Into a teeny tiny little babby. But it's not just Jean, even the team who appear to rescue him exist in this world and its landscape, and those rules apply, but they're not our rules. Doors just open in vines, but more than that, they happily and lazily float through the air like it's nothing. Meaning, it's not just Jean this affects by this reality. Those who enter the dream are affected by the dream. Dreamlike logic applies to everyone. But what's also important about that is it doesn't wake Jean up when he realizes this is a dream, or when he realizes there are people there, at least not that we know. Xion says they have to defeat the Grim in the dream in order to pull him out. So, realizing you're in a dream doesn't wake you up. Even the dreamer realizing they're in the dream doesn't wake you up. So all this dream logic and these dream worlds that affect them in unreal ways still apply and doesn't kick you out of the dream. But what we have to keep in mind is we're heading into Weiss's nightmare next. And where Jean is cut off alone and wallowing, Weiss is clearly dominating and powerful on a wide scale. It'll be a wider world, we're talking about all of Atlas possibly, and more. But this means free reign to do whatever the hell they want. The action can be insane, the semblances can be world-breaking, dust could be enormous, and the giant enemies can be monsters of godlike proportion, and it doesn't matter. In fact, it'd be pretty great to explain some of these things, like the insane mechs we see that seem far beyond the regular reach of Atlas. It's not, if Weiss was in control, mechs would end up this advanced, it's we're in a dream, they're whatever that the dream cooks up. It's dream logic, it's dream physics, and that means it's a dream scenario to get as much out of this as possible. Look, there's a chance we don't see anything super crazy, yet with all rules removed and breaks taken off, we could see things we've essentially never seen before, that were never conceivable in RWBY combat. Because Weiss's is probably going to be a more grounded world, I'm sure that it won't be flying or any of that, but it could be so exaggerated, the effects and the animation could go off. Semblances can still work the same way they do in the real world, like RWBY can go super fast, but that could be extremed, it could be animated like crazy. Dust, when used, could be massive and could have huge effects on things around them. The rules don't apply anymore, but in terms of what you could get out of that visually, it could put everything we've seen so far to shame. It's possible. But keeping that all in mind, especially Weiss's mind, let's delve in there more because I got a feeling we can pretty much clarify number 2. Weiss created the new character designs. This one perhaps doesn't even sound like something you need to figure out. Of course she did in a way, it's her nightmare, so the clothes they wear and the visions of themselves in that dream come from Weiss's mind, but I mean a little more than that. Because it's not hard to deduce how these characters appear in the dream, for the most part logically lines up with how Weiss sees these characters, at least for the key players. What Weiss thinks and matters as they enter her dream is going to apply. For characters she doesn't know very well, they're primarily unchanged, right? She thinks very little of Jean, he's basically unchanged, he's just got a little warm beanie and scarf, there's not a whole lot different, she doesn't think much of him. Same for Ren, it's a warm version of his usual gear. Even Nora's is basically her same silhouette and same shape, just a warmer weather style, so this isn't so compelling so far. Even Yang's really isn't so convincing to this argument, it's just a tough looking version of herself as usual but warmer. However, the remaining 3 really give this away. And the first one that's really interesting to me is Pyrrha. We all know that Weiss places Pyrrha on a pedestal. She was her dream teammate, and she doesn't understand why she's lowering herself to partner with Jean. She's repeated over and over, even in this condensed version, how much she wanted Pyrrha, and has spouted Pyrrha's status and accomplishments to others as bragging. She thinks Pyrrha should be much more big-headed than she is. It's little wonder, therefore, that Pyrrha appears exactly how Weiss pictures her, almost goddess-like, in expensive, regal clothing. And particularly, people have noticed, it's similar to Weiss's Atlas outfits. And of course it is, as Pyrrha is basically an Atlas noble in this design. In fact, if this nightmare is basically a monkey's paw scenario where Weiss got everything she ever wanted, don't be surprised if in the dream, Pyrrha is actually her partner. This is the reality where she did partner with Pyrrha or gets Pyrrha as a partner. Pyrrha could be living an Atlas with her now, dressed like this. It would make sense, it's where this fashion comes from. And Pyrrha's personality might match. And now, if you want to interpret that partnership as something more than teammates, as some people have been speculating, go right ahead. That's on you. Not touching that for this one, but you know, could happen. It would certainly be an interesting and drastic departure from what we've seen elsewhere. However, I repeat, as far as I'm concerned, Pyrrha appearing like a regal Atlesian is not an accident. It's what Weiss wants her to be. Next is Blake, and yeah, look at it. She's super faunus. She either has a tail or is dressed to make it look like she has one, and again, hyper-reality. Who says the faunus here have one faunus trait? They don't have to fit faunus rules. They could have multiple attributes. She could actually have a tail here. They appear how Weiss sees them, how part of Weiss saw them anyway, the way she was raised to see them, the way she thinks of them. She doesn't maybe know the details or care too much, or it's just exaggerated because it's a dream. As much as she talks about the White Fang, she never mentions having seen one. She has talked about attending funerals of people that they've killed, etc., but has she seen a White Fang? Does she know that they're just regular old people with a uniform? Maybe, but the more irrational side of her, part of her mentality and her thought process, especially in this dream world on this monkey's paw scenario, probably see them like this, overly expressing their faunusness, dressed like full animals. She sees the White Fang as radical, dastardly monsters. She expresses that, as far as she's concerned, they want to wipe out all of humanity. So, she's created this appearance of them obviously not trying to hide who they are, of them obviously not blending in or being normal, of this over-exaggerated faunus animal appearance that is obviously nothing like Blake. Even when Blake is at home and comfortable, she doesn't dress like her crazy animal. We know that, and Weiss doesn't. So here's Blake doing the cat thing to the nines, despite the fact Blake was obviously doing her best to hide her faunus traits even when Weiss knew her. But there's one extra thing I actually really like here now. The half bow, which I thought was so dumb. This weird, why is she wearing that? Why would she be wearing that? But it's a reflection of Weiss's thoughts, I think. It makes sense. It's Weiss trying to see her for who she is. She is consciously aware of that struggle. So when she formulates this image of Blake, there's still some doubts manifesting from the good side of her. Pretty cool, is she's half in, half out. And lastly is RWBY. I mean, it's everything Weiss said she was. Look at this design. It's immature, it's trying to show off, trying to be cool, and having her priorities wrong. And that comes through even more, especially with Crescent Rose. Rather than seeing it for what it is and the usefulness of it transforming, instead, Weiss sees it as stupidly flashy. In this reality, RWBY turning it into a snowboard because it's pointlessly flashy, and rather than being effective, it's showing off. She invented this image of RWBY, that's how she sees her, as a kid trying to show off, which is what she stated multiple times. But since we're talking about the others in the dream, that takes us to the next point, number 3. Team Juniper won't be joining them in the dream. I know, they have outfits, and they'll be in the dream, and they've been in one already. Well, sorry, I really doubt that's gonna happen. They're not gonna be there. There's 3 pieces of evidence for this, one damning, but we'll do the supporting ones first. So first off, simply the setup with Xion. The design that's made for them to lay on clearly is there to accommodate 4, but I'll freely admit that's kinda nothing. Perhaps they can make a different design that can accommodate 8, or perhaps make a second design next to it that connects to the first. These things could be possible, so okay. But number 2 is the rules themselves, the rules laid out by Xion. The rules say that only those you care about can enter, and if not, your heart will reject, hence why they use teammates. How close they are is what makes this possible. At this point, the teams are not that close, and especially in this sped up version, we haven't seen any of it, so it'd be a real failure to say that they are. It should be hard for even Blake to enter, but we'll allow it since they just made up in the real world. But Jean, Nora, or Ren wouldn't fit at all. We haven't seen them interact at all, but especially for Jean, who she doesn't like. Lastly is the big one. They basically just told us. Back to these outfit designs again, and it's pretty clear if you just read what they're called. They're all named. Weiss is Nightmare side. She's the host, it's her nightmare. She's on the other side, she looks like this. Then the rest of Team RWBY are lucid dreams, which, as you most likely know, means you're conscious in a dream. They are conscious in the dream. They will inhabit these designs. These are the dream versions of them, but their real minds will be in there. That's who they really are. But Team Juniper, no luck. See, they're all the same. They're all dream actor. They're not lucid dreamers, they're not awake. They are dream actors, playing their roles in the dream. They're not real. They're simply projections. They're the dream version of these characters in Weiss's mind. They're like every other person in the dream world who isn't Weiss and Team RWBY, that they're just part of the dream world. It's quite likely Team RWBY find these people and perhaps even meet up with them. And probably in this dream state they might know each other, might have gone to Beacon. It all sort of plays along the same ideas, you never know. It would make sense for Weiss's mind to go along those logical paths, because for the most part there's no reason for them to act any different unless specifically this nightmare creates them acting different. They might act like a little bit of caricatures of themselves, just what Weiss has observed them acting like, but in general, there's no reasons they wouldn't mostly be themselves, although I think, again, that Pyrrha might not be. But it's just Weiss's interpretation of people, and the people in the head can have good and bad, or people against and for her, so that's it. There's not really Team Juniper in there, it's just Weiss's projections in her mind. And that plays into number 4. It seems obvious, but we'll cover it anyway. And that is that Atlas will be different, presuming we go there, but we're totally going there. Now, I mean this in a few ways. Obviously, under Dictator Weiss, it will be different. We will have these mechs that are different. It's going to look different. But that's not exactly what I mean. We're familiar with Atlas if you've watched the show. If we follow that nightmare grim that delves into your mind, creates nightmares, and in this case, it's a dark timeline, it still relies on what Weiss knows. The Nightmare Grim probably doesn't know things that she doesn't know. So let's say we might see Ironwood, but it won't be Ironwood, it'll be who Weiss knew Ironwood as, and then perhaps that version influenced by the events of the nightmare. To quickly give an example, she wouldn't know Ironwood's semblance, she wouldn't know how he reacts to people lying, she might know him as a friendly headmaster or a stern military chief, however she knows him, if at all. That's his projection in her dream, and then maybe whatever that type of person would do in response to the nightmare. So that's how we might meet him, but it won't be anything like real him. She won't know his secrets, won't know the ins and outs, how could she? And if she doesn't know it, the Nightmare Grim can't put it in. Similarly, don't expect to see Penny or Pietro, because Weiss does not know Pietro exists, and Weiss has no idea about Penny, which I think plays into actually a big cut at the end of the Volume 1 that we saw, the dock fight. Remember how that was cut? And even I said it was disappointing that it was cut because there were so many things like the gunchucks and Penny that we wanted to see. Well, we saw none of it, but interestingly, maybe that's because Weiss saw even less than we did. She and Yang arrive totally after everything is done. Weiss has no idea about Penny at all, even that she's from Atlas as far as we know. And even if, at some point off camera, we just say Weiss learned she was from Atlas, she has no idea about the robot stuff, no idea about the swords, no idea about the jets in her feet, nothing. She didn't see any of that. Which means if you're gonna see Penny in Atlas, she's gonna probably be a real girl and probably pretty incompetent, because that's all Weiss thought of her as. And even if she heard she's a good fighter, she'd probably be completely different. And just like she has no idea that she's a robot or anything she can do, the same goes for Sun. She has no idea what he can do. In fact, I don't think we'll be seeing Sun at all. But even if we do, it'll probably be as perhaps a member of the White Fang, because that's what Weiss thought of him. And if that's the case, he's going to totally have a different weapon too, because she didn't see the gunchucks, she doesn't know they exist, doesn't know anything about it. She didn't see it. Her mind would not randomly come up with the right answer. However, saying that, I don't want to imply she can't come up with a new answer. She doesn't know about Penny, Sun, Pietro, or Ironwood, except for perhaps whatever mild interaction she might have had in her life at that point, which surely wasn't much. But she can invent new options, she can give them new weapons, new semblances in her mind. She might know who the Aesops are, but I doubt she would ever have met them or known their names if she's even seen them. She might just know they exist from living in Atlas. For most of the anime, it actually holds true so far that outside of the introductions of Team RWBY, we mostly only saw events Weiss was there for. And if you stick to that, thinking that we'll be with the other members of Team RWBY so it's okay to see the things they saw, that the big influences in Weiss's mind are gonna be the things she saw. And if they stick to that, if that's actually the way it goes, I'm totally flipped on the dock fight. I'm happy not seeing it. It's a shame not to see it in this animation, but if that's the reason, because that way Weiss saw none of it, and to go along with that, the audience also saw none of it, so we're on the same page as Weiss, that's pretty brilliant. And be honest, you'd be happy with it too if we got to see Penny as a real girl. Just, that's how Weiss saw her, and that's all she would know, so of course that's how she turns out in the dream world. But now stick with me, we've got 2 more to go through, but I will say these ones aren't as certain. These ones aren't as logic deductions as the other ones, but I do think these are quite likely. I might make another video with more wider questions, we'll see. But for now, this is some speculation, but it is more likely speculation. One of the biggest ones that stood out to me is, I don't think the whole show will take place in the dream, and I know it sounds logical for it to do that it makes sense so we get lost in the dream world and attached to it. However, they made sure to establish one big thing that stood out to me, and I mentioned it at the time, but at least makes me think we're going to be reminded of the real world, and that we might even have to leave and come back, who knows. Perhaps like the team fails and has to try again. And that is the phone. They made sure to establish the phone out, which is a weird thing to establish. People thought it was weird, but they made sure that we saw there was the phone. We took the time in establishing it, a line in and out of the dream, which, if you're like me, brings to thought one specific thing, and that's the Matrix, an operator, someone to guide you from the outside. Now, perhaps Shion can't totally do that, can't see everything in the dream, but you could have Shion saying, hurry up, Weiss doesn't have much longer, or passing on advice from allies from the outside world, or telling them to pull back, whatever. But that line in and out means that we will be jumping out at some point, at least in the focus of the show, or at least reminded that the real world is there when they get spoken to, which will surely interrupt the reality of the dream. The outside world in some way will be interjecting, and probably more than once if this is going to be an extended thing. Otherwise, there's no reason to put that line in and out there if it's not going to be used. And in an accelerated show like this where they had to cut lots of things, they made sure to put that one in. However, this doesn't mean it's a bad thing. We could still spend the rest of the show mostly in the dream and only cut out for certain things, or just have the voice interject, but it's still going to happen in some way. However, there can be some really fun scenarios for why that is. We can cut to Shion and the others talking about what's going on, or perhaps they need something, like RWBY calls out of the dream because they need something to help convince Weiss, and Team Juniper in the real world have to run to Team RWBY's room and start rifling through Weiss's belongings to try and find a diary or something to learn what Weiss is thinking, or to get info on Weiss that can help the team in the dream. Or perhaps they have to go get her scroll and look up her family, and perhaps even go make a call at the tower. Like, imagine Team Juniper in the CCT around the screen trying to call Jacques, or Whitley, or Winter, and running up against the wall that is the Schnee family in an attempt to help get info for Weiss, so they can pass it back to Team RWBY in the dream so they can use it to try and pull Weiss out. Lots of possibilities there. This could also mean there's a getting lost in the dream aspect. I'd just like to point that out. That perhaps what we're going to do is that they start thinking the dream is real, and they have to call in and remind them, hey, this isn't real, please focus on what your mission is, don't get lost in the dream. Personally, I don't like that. I hope they don't do that. It's a little played out and overdone, but that's personal opinion, but it is an option. But yeah, basically, the phone is there, they made sure to establish the phone, and if they took the time to establish it, they're gonna use it. And finally, the last one, because it's very fun and I think it's probable, if not possible, people are gonna die. Now remember, it's a dream. So all of the non-Team RWBY people can die consequence-free. They can show Team Juniper die horribly. They can show the Schnees die dramatically. Anyone Weiss knows can be horribly killed and maimed, and that's great, it doesn't matter. But because of that, we can see things in the show we've never actually seen in the series and probably will ever see. And it fits the darker themes. It seems like that's what we're going for. We're doing this dictator thing, we have some dark people involved. This could be really cool. My bet is at least Jean dies. I know that sounds super simple, but it's to flip the usual of what happens, and also to put others through that, and subconsciously, Weiss doesn't like him. So there's a chance that stuff sort of goes for him, if you get what I mean. However, I say consequence-free, it's not really consequence-free, because there's no reason in the dream world this wouldn't stick. Like, if John dies, he stays dead from that point in the dream on. So Team RWBY in there, who are trying to gather allies to help them get to what they need, lose an ally. So it still does impact their ability to continue. However, if you want my broader speculation, I think Team RWBY also dies. I mentioned the Matrix earlier, but I feel like we're actually operating under Inception rules. Don't worry if you think Inception's confusing, it's not a confusing part. In the Matrix, if you die inside, you die for real, because the body cannot live without the mind. But Inception, not so much. It's using dream rules, usual dream rules. If you die in the dream, you wake up. Which is what I think will happen here, which is why I think we'll need multiple attempts into Weiss's dream. Because that way, along the way, Team RWBY can fail. They're coming up against what is probably an army with Weiss at the head. They aren't trained enough for this. They probably will fail and die and be kicked out of the nightmare. And then in the real world, they'll need to learn things, talk to each other, go through things, and go in again. But this does have consequences too. It's not for no reason, because the longer they take, the more time Weiss is under, and basically dying. So, they don't have unlimited attempts, they don't have unlimited time. So, even for the finale, you can get the, this is your last chance. You get to go under one more time. If you fail, we're out of time and Weiss will succumb to the nightmare. Or, the other option is, they raise the stakes and say, as the nightmare gets stronger inside Weiss, its power over her is becoming stronger. So, when I, Shion, connect your mind to hers, the connection will be more serious, and if you die this time, you die for real. Are you sure you want to go in? Then they get together as a team and say yes, of course, and they go in. That's a great way to ratchet up tension for your finale. I think it's this way actually for a few reasons. One is that Shion did not take any time in warning Team Juniper. Yes, we were speeding through things, but they were the example team. They're what we, the audience, and Team RWBY watch to prepare us for what's coming next. And Shion didn't say, you can die in there and make it real serious. They said, you gotta go in there and defeat the Grim. Perhaps that's implied, but they didn't make it really serious sounding at the start. And these are the people who just got through their initiation. It feels like that would have been an important thing to establish, and they didn't. And yes, we do see they have their little totems, which perhaps you could say will show damage as they get damage, or something Shion can use to monitor them in the dream, and perhaps that's true, and perhaps that means they die for real, but I feel like instead, they do take damage and that tells Shion how you are in the dream, but that you might get kicked out. The dolls take damage along with you, but they don't die along with you. You wake up and they die. Although, then you can change that to meaning you're gonna die when you go in at the end and it's real serious and you can die this time. Then you're watching the dolls with a newfound level of panic. But also, the big one, there's no evidence for this, but there's one more reason that I think this might be the way, and that's because it means we get to see Team RWBY die. Something you would never imagine you'd see in the main show. Imagine a RWBY watching Yang be crushed into a pile of gore that pops under the foot of a giant mech or something horrific. Especially the first time, and then she has to process that, and then gets killed herself before being kicked out of the dream, waking up, and being back at Beacon, and then they all have to process that, hugs, crying, etc. I mean, they are in a nightmare, having nightmaric repercussions, and having to see things you didn't want to see can be a big part of that, including those closest to you biting it horribly. Not to mention you can have some ironic things, like someone losing a limb, perhaps not Yang this time, and they make a comment on it, and they have to operate with the missing limb until they get kicked out, and when they go back in they have their limb back. Things like that, you can do crazy stuff. Basically, especially with the Team RWBY dying, having to watch each other die, that's way too good to pass up in this chance to sort of do this non-canon or canon-adjacent nightmare dark story. So I think there's a good chance that happens. But those will do us for now. Surely I missed some things, I don't claim I'm always totally correct, but giving the whole thing a once over, this is what I picked out. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree or disagree? Did I miss something? I probably did. Leave us a like on the video if you could, because it would really help out, and please subscribe if you want to see more. Until next time, my name is Rigger, hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope I did alright.